Hello, my name's Kerin Webb and I'm a clairvoyant psychic medium, and what I thought I'd do today is just to create a little video for you that give you an idea of what mediumship is, how it might work, what a psychic reading is, and some of the information that I'll often talk to my clients about just before I begin a reading. Now, I've said to clients many times over the years that I never know how a reading is going to unfold before I start. It can cover a wide spectrum. Obviously mediumship may occur. And when that takes place, I've found over the years that spirit can be really specific with regard to the information that they provide. For instance, I'll give you an example. I remember one day, it was a number of years ago, a lady sat down in my reading room and she said to me, "Can you connect with my dad who's on the other side?" Now, I can always only ever say I'll try. I haven't got the equivalent of a bat phone to call up people on demand. But having said that, invariably, if somebody really wants to speak to or communicate with a particular individual on the other side, they usually do come through. And they'll either come through as an individual soul or as a group of souls bringing information through that identifies themselves. So in this lady's case, she said, "Can you connect with my dad who's on the other side?" I said I'd try. I closed my eyes for a few moments and I cast my thoughts in the direction of spirit. And within, I don't know, a couple of 3 seconds, something like that, in my mind I heard the name George. Now, I'd never met this woman before and I knew nothing about her. I opened my eyes, looked at her and said, "Okay, I'm hearing the name George." She went, "Great, that was my dad's name." So within a very few seconds of her asking me to see if I could communicate with her father, I brought his name through with the help of my spirit guides and obviously with his help on the other side. He then followed up with lots of identifying information about himself and then he brought my mother through too. So that's one way a reading might unfold, a psychic reading. Departed loved ones, it can be family members, friends, sometimes quite obscure people will come through. I've had occasion where I've been doing a reading and I might describe somebody to the person I'm with or who's phoning me for a reading, and they might say something like, "Yeah, I know who you're on about, but you know, I haven't thought of them in years and I didn't really know them that well." So sometimes, as I say, obscure people can come through, but usually it'll be a close family member or a close friend, even pets. I did a reading about a couple of weeks ago where spirit described a cat to me and I said they want me to reference a cat and I'm getting the name Smokey, and that was the name of the person's cat. So just as departed loved ones might give me a name like George or you know, some other name, I think that's, I don't know whether that was the first time I've actually had an animal's name. It's the only one I can remember recently. Usually they'll describe the animal and maybe some of its traits, but that one's one that stands out as recently actually having given me the name as well. So mediumship can occur. The other big thing that happens in a psychic reading is that spirit will guide me to talk about what is uppermost in a person's mind now. Now, I always tell my clients in advance, don't tell me anything about yourself. The less I know, the better. I prefer to work with somebody, at least particularly for the first time, knowing little or nothing about them. And the reason I prefer to work that way is because if a person tells me a lot about themselves and then information comes through to me in a reading, they could, I suppose, leave the reading wondering, well, did what he shared with me actually come from spirit psychically, or was he just feeding back to me information that they shared with me? Actually, a humorous point, I remember a number of years ago, a woman came to see me, and this is pretty much how it's a bit speeded up, but this is pretty much how the opening minute or two of the reading went. She said something like, "Hello Kerin, my name's Sally, my boyfriend is Fred, I work at Marks and Spencer's, he works at Tesco's, we're about to go to Malta on holiday," and I said, "Stop, there'll be nothing left for me to tell you." So ever since that day, I've said to people in advance, tell me nothing. Because then, when really specific, meaningful evidence comes through, you're going to be under no shadow of a doubt that the information is coming from spirit rather than me feeding back to you things that you've already told me. So they'll invariably guide me to what's uppermost in a person's mind. So if there's a relationship breakup, a change of job, move of house, you know, some other relevant issue, spirit will usually guide me to it. They'll highlight the dynamics. They'll give me a pretty good idea of what's going on at the moment, which I'll share with my client. And, you know, they'll often be very astounded at how detailed the information will be about their current situation. And then often what Spirit will do too is they will give me an idea to share with the client of what led up to a current situation. So they'll talk about the now, they'll talk about things that have led up to a current situation, and then very often, it seems, based on the feedback that I've had from clients, they can be quite accurate at predicting the likely outcome of a future event. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Sometimes it'll happen in an instant. You know, the person will leave the reading and within the space of a few hours, something that was of a predictive nature will come true, come to light. So for instance, I was doing a reading for a woman, I don't know, maybe about 6 months ago, maybe a bit more than that, but not so long ago. And during the reading, we talked a lot about what was going on in her life. Lots of meaningful evidence came through that she was able to identify. But at one point, Spirit guided me to reference somebody that would be meaningful to her, or that would figure prominently to her in Swindon with a hole in the heart. So the location was Swindon, and the health condition that they chose to highlight to identify this person was a hole in the heart. And in the reading, at the time of the reading, the woman I was talking to said, look, can't really place that. So I said to her, okay, well just hold on to that, because, you know, oftentimes if it doesn't make sense now, there's a pretty good chance it will later. Anyway, she emailed me, I think, later that day, if not, it was the next day, very soon afterwards, to say that after the reading, she'd left the reading here, and she'd gone immediately to visit her mother. And when she'd arrived at her mother's, her mother mentioned that a friend of hers, her mother's friend, who lived in Swindon, had just had a baby that had been diagnosed with a hole in the heart. And that happened within about, I don't know, a couple of hours of the reading. So she wasn't able to identify it at the time, but within a couple of hours, the accuracy of the message was borne out. Then another situation, there's a lady that been having readings with me now for, I guess, about 6 years. And when she started to have readings with me, she lived in the UK. She'd been through a very, very difficult situation in which she'd lost a loved one through tragic circumstances, and as a result she was bringing up 2 young sons on her own. And her situation was pretty difficult, and she contacted me for a reading. And in one of the first readings I did for her, I said, look, Spirit is showing me that you're going to be offered 2 jobs at about the same time by 2 different banks, one of which is going to necessitate a move to Australia, and you'll be living in Sydney, and I see you living in a lovely flat with your sons in Sydney. And time went by, and she would have readings with me, and she would say, this Australia thing hasn't happened yet. Can you get any more from Spirit? So I go back to Spirit, and they were adamant that 2 banks, round about the same time, would offer her a job, and lo and behold, she moved to Sydney. Anyway, 5 years elapsed. Other things went on in her life. We did other readings, other meaningful information came through to help with family circumstances and other things, but 5 years elapsed. And then, lo and behold, 2 banks offered this woman interviews and a job, one of which necessitated moving to Sydney, Australia. Now for about the last, I think it's 1.5 years, when she phones me for a reading, she phones me from the apartment in Sydney that Spirit predicted 5 years before she got there. So these are 2 examples from different ends of the spectrum. One of how something predicted came true within hours. Something else took 5 years. Another one I can share with you. I was doing a reading for a woman in America. 3 women, sisters I've read for, and one of their daughters. On a number of occasions, and we've got some fantastic evidence through. And on one of these occasions, one of the women with her husband was about to buy some properties, and she just wanted to have a reading and see if Spirit had anything to say about that. So we did this reading. It was a good reading, got some good information through, but at one point in the reading I said, look, Spirit wants me to reference a conical angel, something like you'd see on the top of a Christmas tree. And she said, sorry Kerin, that's something I can't place. She couldn't make sense of it. Anyway, she emailed me 6 weeks later to say that she'd purchased the properties with her husband. I think it was about 6 weeks later. She'd purchased the properties with her husband, and as she'd been walking around one of these properties, opening the cupboards and the drawers, all of the cupboards and drawers were empty, as you would expect a vacated property to be, except for one, which had a little tea light candle cover. You put a little tea light candle underneath. in the shape of a conical angel, just like you'd see on the top of a Christmas tree. And if you go to my website, www.kerin, that's Kerin, www.kerin-webb, webb.co.uk. So that's www.kerin, Kerin-webb, webb.co.uk. If you scroll down the right hand side of the page, you'll actually see a photograph that she took of this angelic figure that Spirit identified 6 weeks before she purchased the properties. So those are a few examples of how accurate Spirit can be predictively. Just as departed loved ones will come through, so too very, very often will angelic beings, and sometimes even, I guess, what we could best call deities. I don't pretend to know exactly what the hierarchy is like on the other side, and I'm doubtful of those that claim to have all the answers to all of the questions, particularly esoteric questions like that. But nevertheless, it does seem to be that there are various angelic beings and deities of different kinds, perhaps under the umbrella of a greater wisdom, or that we could perhaps call God or the goddess or the source. But under that umbrella, that greater universal mind, there seem to be other powerful beings, loving beings that we could best describe as angels or deities, and sometimes they will name themselves too. And I've had occasion where, for instance, not so long ago, I was doing a reading for somebody, and I was led to reference the name of a particular spirit guide, which I can't remember at the moment, but I was led to reference a particular spirit guide, and the person said to me something like, "That's remarkable, I lit a candle to that spirit guide or that guardian angel before I came for the reading." So unbeknown to me consciously, of all the different guardian angels and deities and spirit guides there are out there, I was led to reference a particular one, and that person had lit a candle and said a prayer just before they came for the reading, asking for help from that guide. Another similar example, again, if you go to my website, near the picture of the conical angel, you'll see a picture of a little fairy figurine. And this was as a result of a reading that happened around about a year ago. Two people came to see me for a reading. I worked with one whilst one waited outside in the car, and then I worked with the other. One was an elderly lady, and the other was a guy, middle-aged guy, who was a builder, who'd brought her for the reading and then decided to have a reading himself afterwards. Now, I'm not immune to making unconscious stereotypes of people when I'm working with them. And I was working with this guy, giving him lots of information. Both the readings, we got some stellar information through, the lady first and then him. But partway through the reading, Spirit started to draw my attention to a fairy. And I thought, this guy he's what we would call a man's man, a builder. And I thought, how am I going to, reference to him a fairy in a way that he's not going to think, like, this is free, this is weird, this is freaky, or, what's he trying to sort of say to me? As I was trying to evaluate what Spirit trying to say and trying to make sense of it, which I couldn't fully understand, the message was getting stronger and stronger that I needed to say to this guy there was something relevant for him, a message for him to do with a fairy. So I did. I got my courage up and I said, "Look, I don't know what this means, but Spirit is really insistent that I say to you that there's a sign for you about a fairy." And the expression on his face was priceless. He took out of his pocket a fairy figurine. And I think, if I remember correctly, the story was that sometime, I don't know, months or years before, I think he'd probably asked for a sign or something from Spirit, and he'd found this fairy figurine, and he kept it with him as almost like a keepsake or a talisman or something like that, and it helped him to feel closer to Spirit. Maybe a bit like if you go to a Catholic church or a temple or something like that, and there's an icon there of a particular deity, and people might touch, I think it's St. Peter's feet, isn't it, if you go to a Catholic country, and they'll touch that and it makes them feel close in some way. And in his case, he carried this fairy figurine, and it was his way of it was almost like an intermediary between him and Spirit, and it made him feel close. And he told me that during the previous reading, when I was working with the lady, he'd been holding on to this fairy figurine, and he'd been asking Spirit, "Please get me to mention the fairy, and that would be the sign for him that would prove that Spirit was guiding the reading. And lo and behold, despite my doubts and fears that I might, it might break the reading if I related to a fairy, it was exactly the right thing to say. So that's another thing I've learned now to trust over the years, to share with people what Spirit's sharing with me despite my own doubts. And I'll give you two recent examples from the last week. Let me have a think. Okay, one was a week ago. I was doing a Skype call to a woman in the United Arab Emirates, and I brought through, with the help of Spirit, her departed father and departed mother, and we got some really good accurate information. We talked about her current life circumstances, but then at one point Spirit wanted me to reference the fact that she or somebody close to her had just recently eaten a bacon sandwich, and they'd made a point of saying it had been the first time that they'd had a bacon sandwich in years. Now, I was aware they were calling from a Muslim country, and I know that on the whole, pork is not something that is available in the Muslim world, and certainly not something that a devout Muslim would eat. They're not Muslims, by the way, but I just thought it was unlikely, being in a Muslim country, that pork would be readily available. But nevertheless, I shared this message with her. I said, look, they want me to reference the bacon sandwich that was eaten recently, and that the comment was at the time between the people eating them that they hadn't had bacon sandwich and they didn't know how long. And she was stunned. She said she and her husband, the previous day, she said bacon is available, pork is available in this particular country, if you know where to go for it. And just the day before, she and her husband had a bacon sandwich for the first time in years, and they commented together with each other that how long it had been since they'd had one. Then just yesterday I was doing a reading. Talked a lot about my client's current life circumstances, a difficult recent relationship breakup, and other things, which was no doubt the reason for her visiting. But then at one point, Spirit began to flood my mind with images of meerkats. And here I am in the UK, and I was thinking, how on earth can a meerkat have relevance to this person? But having learned over the years not to withhold something, particularly if Spirit's very insistent, I said, look, don't know what this means, but they want me to reference meerkats for you. And she too was quite amazed. She said, I have toy meerkats, several toy meerkats in her house. I think they're on display. She said, but I love meerkats so much that every now and again I go to this, it must be a zoo that's not too far away, I go to this particular zoo specifically to see the meerkats. Now, of course, she didn't come for a reading to talk about meerkats. She came for a reading to talk about relationship issues and things like that. And Spirit was very, very helpful in that regard. But I've often said to people when these kind of things happen, I think it's Spirit's way of adding an extra dimension of evidence. So they talk about the issues that are uppermost in a person's mind. They might bring through a departed loved one, or two or three or four. They might bring through some spirit guides and guardian angels. But also when they talk about, in some ways we could say mundane things, but they're not really mundane because they're part of the tapestry of a person's life. And when information like this adds an extra dimension of specificity, and I think it just goes to show how aware of our life circumstances our departed loved ones, our guardian angels are. They are, if you like, progressing through our lives with us intimately, with regard to even the day-to-day things like, going to the zoo to see meerkats. So the readings can be very, very specific and cover, a wide range of information. The other thing that will happen sometimes too, this is rarer, but it does happen from time to time. Spirit will sometimes highlight past life information. And when that happens, it seems, at least sometimes, there will be a bearing of what's going on in a person's life now with relations to what happened to somebody in a past life. And I can remember, for instance, doing a reading a number of years ago for a woman who, I think she was either Italian or her partner was Italian. And they'd both obviously got caught up in a dysfunctional relationship cycle. And Spirit described to me a pattern, a cycle that happened in this past life. And she said something along the lines of, oh my goodness, that's incredible. That's exactly what's playing out now in my current relationship with this person. And it seemed to us at the time that Spirit was highlighting this dysfunctional dynamic in order to give her, and hopefully him too, the opportunity to make better decisions, to learn from the lessons of the past, and rather than just repeat this negative cycle, to actually do something different and, you know, make a change and learn and grow and improve the situation. I remember once, probably about 3 years ago, and this was the most remarkable past life reading, or number of readings I ever did for somebody. So a guy phoned me from America, and he was quite closed in many ways. He didn't offer much information, which was good, but he was quite closed, and in some ways he came across as uncommunicative. And he said to me, can you do past life readings? And at the time I said to him, well, often as a part of, well, no, not often, sometimes as a part of a reading, past life information will come through. So he said to me in kind of a curt way, he said, I asked you, can you do past life readings? So I reiterated what I'd said, that sometimes information would come through. I said, if you are asking me to do specifically a past life reading for you, then I'm willing to try. Because I'd never done it at that point, a dedicated reading that was focused solely on past lives, but based on the information that had come through as parts of other readings, I said to him I'd give it a try. And I opened my mind to Spirit, and immediately Spirit began to impress upon me a life around ancient Rome. And they did this in a number of ways. I got the sense of ancient Rome, but they also showed me the movies Spartacus and Ben-Hur, which were a couple of very famous movies from times gone by. So my mind was flooded with ancient Rome, and then I began to describe somebody to this man. Oh, and at the time, I remember saying to him, as I mentioned, he didn't say very much. I said to him at the time, look, they're referencing ancient Rome, and they're showing me the movies Ben-Hur and Spartacus. I said, but I don't think they're just referencing the movies. I think they want me to go back to Rome. And he said to me, no, I don't think they're just referencing the movies either. So anyway, I described this guy that they were showing me psychically, somebody that had come from nowhere, and through strength of arm in battle and strength of character too, he'd worked his way up through into a position in the Roman Senate. He'd helped Rome in major battles. I described his house, his wife. I said I sensed he had 2 sons and a daughter who was the apple of his eye. And Spirit even led me to describe his features and the length of his hair as I saw him in his prime. At the end of the reading, this guy said to me, right, I'll tell you now, Kerin, I have had over the years a number of readings with psychics here in America. And as a result, I've been able to do, this is him, I've been able to do research on some of my past lives because putting all the pieces together, he'd been able to identify quite specifically a number of people. And he said to me, okay, so I'm going to ask you now to look up, he asked me, just before the reading ended, he said, can you get a name? Can you get this person's name? Now, there's a pretty good chance, if it's an Anglo-Saxon name of a departed loved one or of somebody who's on this side, because that's my culture, it makes it reasonably easy for Spirit to reference that. But here we were talking about a couple of thousand years ago or thereabouts. So I said I'd try, and I opened my mind to Spirit, and I said something like, I'm getting the name Cessio or Sesto or Sepio or something like that. He said, okay, Kerin, I'll tell you now, I've had a number of readings with psychics in America over the years, and I've been able to identify some of the lives that I think are my past lives. He said, I want you to look up somebody called Scipio Africanus. So the reading ended, and I did. I went to Wikipedia, and I looked up this guy called Scipio Africanus, and it took my breath away. This guy had worked his way up from nowhere by strength of might and strength of character. He had a prime place in the Roman Senate, and I believe, if I remember correctly now, it's been a while since I looked it up, they called him the Roman Hannibal, and he actually defended Rome with the armies of Rome against Hannibal and saved Rome for being overtaken by Hannibal, I guess. The home he had matched the home I described. Even to the length of his hair, there was a coin that was made at the time of Scipio's life with his profile on the coin, and his hair, in his heyday, in his height, was exactly as I described. The one piece of information that was slightly inaccurate was I said he had 2 sons and a daughter who was the apple of his eye. Apparently he had 2 sons and 2 daughters, and my guess is that the other daughter maybe didn't figure as prominently. But one piece of information was slightly out, but the rest of it was spot on. And there were a couple of other readings I did for this person over months afterwards that were equally remarkable. This man had obviously been a figure of history on a number of occasions, and on each time Spirit guided me to specific individuals that he'd already researched, and at the end of the reading he would give me the name and I would describe the details and the dynamics in fine detail. Now I think that reading was given, those readings were given to both of us. For him it reinforced the research that he'd done with psychics in America, but for me, I've often said to people, when you do a mediumship reading, it's either going to be right or wrong. You're going to give somebody a name, you're going to describe a character or life events, and they're either going to say yes it fits or no it doesn't. And that really validates both for the person who's arrived for the reading and for me, the medium, that the information is accurate. But of course with past life information, that isn't usually readily available, because you tend to be sharing with a client that they might have an inkling of certain dynamics, but I've never met anybody else who had done that much research and was able to identify by name at the end of the readings on 3 occasions the persons who they were. And then I looked them up on the internet, they're these historical characters, and they matched the information that I give them. So I think that those readings were also given to me to validate to me, as well as to him, the accuracy of past life information. So it can cover a wide range, a reading can cover a wide range, as you can see, lots and lots of things. They'll also sometimes talk about family members and friends who are on this side of life. So if a family member is going, for instance, through a difficult patch at the moment, Spirit might take 5 or 10 minutes of the reading just to provide some helpful information for them through the relative or friend that's arrived. The essence of a reading is that it's a message of love from the other side. Whether it be a guardian angel predominantly that comes through, or departed loved ones, or some combination, whether it's helping somebody out, helping somebody through a difficult set of life circumstances at the moment, which often happens coupled with information. So, when Spirit talks about current life circumstances, if it's particularly different, they don't just talk about the situation and then leave a person there. Invariably they will talk about the dynamics, and then they will look to the future and they will give them insight into how things will work out and how they will get to the other side of the problematic situation. So it gives them something, like the light at the end of tunnel scenario. It gives the person an understanding not only how, quite likely it seems, on balance of probabilities this event will work out, but that they will get to the other side. And it gives them something to hope for. And I think hope is very, very important. I just used the phrase balance of probabilities. I often say to people, I work in an evidence-based way, as you'll gather from this video. So I will present people with specific measurable evidence, like maybe names of departed loved ones and things like that. But with regard to predictive information, of course, there is always a wait and see factor with that. I might identify, for instance, the conical angel that the person couldn't make sense of at the time, and it was revealed as time passed. So I always say to people, if Spirit seems to be indicating some predictive information, the best way you can judge that, the likely accuracy of it, is as regards the rest of the reading. So if mediumships occurred, and I've given 2 or 3 names of people that were very close, or are still very close to this person, who are on the other side, if I describe a current work situation and a relationship issue that they've told me nothing about, if I mention the fact that they like to go and visit meerkats from time to time, and they've given me no clue of that, and then if Spirit leads me to mention the likely outcome of a situation, on balance of probabilities, if we look at this kind of scientifically, we can reason that, well, if the meerkat information was accurate, if the relationship issue was accurate, if the name of a departed loved one was accurate, then on balance of probabilities, we can reason that it's going to be reasonably likely that the predictive elements are going to be accurate too. So I think that's good. I think that's probably all I'm going to talk about. I've probably spoken for a few more minutes longer than I'd planned to. So I hope you find this helpful. If you want to learn more, I've got a website with, I don't know, probably over 100 pages, I'm sure over 100 pages on there, full of articles to do with psychic issues. It's chock-a-block full of testimonials from people that have had readings with me from the UK and all around the world, the United States, Australia, Canada, the Middle East, Europe, loads and loads of places. So there are lots of testimonials, a whole load of articles, and you know, other information that I think you'll find quite helpful. I mentioned the website earlier. If you want to go there, the best place to go is www.kerin-webb.co.uk. That's www.kerin-webb.co.uk. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to watch this video, and maybe I'll get to do a reading for you one day. Thank you. Bye-bye.